morning mist hugged the Hudson River, a soft, gray blanket veiling secrets held for decades. Jake Hunter stood on his old dock, his 60-year-old frame silhouetted against the breaking dawn. Silver hair, deep lines etched on his face, yet he carried himself with the unmistakable posture of a man who had once operated in the shadows of America's most dangerous battlefields. Northport, New York, was the kind of small town that appeared on maps but existed primarily in the memories of those who had grown up there. A place where time seemed to slow, where the rush of the modern world felt distant. For Jake, it was perfect. A place to disappear. He cast his line into the river's dark waters, the motion automatic after thousands of repetitions. Fishing wasn't just a hobby. It was a meditation. The rhythm of cast and retrieve mirrored the controlled breathing techniques HED learned decades ago in basic underwater demolition SEIL training. Inhale, cast, exhale, wait. His weathered hands, still powerful despite the arthritis beginning to curl his fingers, worked the line with precision. Jake's bait tackle sat at the edge of town, a modest establishment that served the occasional tourist and the handful of locals who shared his passion for fishing. The store provided cover income, and most importantly, normalcy. No one in Northport suspected that the quiet man who sold them fishing gear had once been Lieutenant Jake Hunter, SEAL Team 6, with 11 confirmed operations that would never appear in any history book. The morning ritual never varied. Up at 430 hours. Perimeter check of his property. Coffee brewed strong enough to stand a spoon in. Then down to the river before the sun crested the tree line. Old habits died hard. 20 years removed from active duty, and Jake still couldn't sleep past dawn. As he reeled in his line empty again, his eyes scanned the tree line on the opposite bank. An unconscious security assessment. Most civilians looked at scenery. Jake looked for sight lines, cover positions, potential threats. HED never fully turned off the warrior's mindset that had kept him alive through 3 decades of service. Back at his cabin, Jake unlocked the reinforced door with its 3 separate deadbolts. The modest exterior belied the fortress within. The windows were Hurricane Midas grade, the walls reinforced, and beneath the hardwood floors ran a pressure-sensitive alarm system of his own design. In the master bedroom, behind a sliding bookcase that would have seemed melodramatic to anyone else, lay his personal arsenal. An M4A1 carbine, modified with a suppressor and an ACOG sight, hung beside a SIG's RP-226 Navy, the same model HED carried during his SEAL days. Below them, a custom-built sniper rifle HED never had to use but maintained meticulously. Jake ran his fingers over the weapons, feeling the familiar weight and balance of each. Not paranoia, he told himself. Preparation. The scar that ran from his left shoulder blade to his right kidney winged as he reached for the rifle. A souvenir from Afghanistan. The 1002nd Operation Enduring Freedom. The memory flashed and widened. The whistle of incoming fire. The wet thud of rounds hitting flesh. Carrying his spotter through mountain terrain with a bullet in his own back. Sometimes Jake wondered if HED left more than blood in those mountains. Perhaps pieces of his soul had stayed behind. At exactly 700 hours, Jake opened the bait shop. By 730, the regulars began to filter in. Mostly retirees and weekend warriors looking for advice on lures and local hotspots. Jake played his role perfectly, the helpful, slightly gruff veteran who knew every bend in the river and every fish that swam it. "Morning, Jake," called Bill Freeman, Northport's police chief, as he pushed through the door. Steve Freeman was the closest thing Jake had to a friend in town, though neither man would have used that term. They shared a tacit understanding, the unspoken bond of men who had seen things others couldn't imagine. "Chief," Jake acknowledged with a nod, continuing to stock a display of fishing flies. "Oh, thought you might want to know," Freeman said casually, leaning against the counter. "We got some new folks in town. Some kind of development company. Looking at property along the South Bend." Jake's hands paused momentarily. and continued their work. The South Bend, less than 2 miles from his cabin. That right? Yeah. Big talk about a resort. Condos. All that work. Freeman watched Jake carefully. Guy in charge seems the slick type. Name's Coleman. Richard Coleman. Jake kept his expression neutral, but his mind was cataloging the information, filing it away. Northport wasn't the kind of place that attracted developers. The land along the South Bend was rough, not ideal for construction. Something didn't fit. Appreciate the heads minus up, Jake replied. After Freeman left, Jake found himself staring out the window toward the south bend of the river. Development meant people. People meant attention. Attention was something Jake had spent 20 years avoiding, but something else snagged at him. Something beyond the simple disruption of his carefully constructed isolation. Later that night, a sudden crash outside his cabin sent Jake rolling from his bed to the floor in one fluid motion. His hand automatically reached for the Sig Sauer he kept in the nightstand. Hard hammer. He crouched in the darkness listening. After 30 seconds of silence, he identified the sound. I raccoon had knocked over his trash can again. As his pulse slowed, Jake felt a familiar shame. The hair minus trigger reflexes. The instant combat readiness. They were hard to explain to civilians. They didn't understand how the wiring in your brain changed after you'd been hunted by other men. How you never really came all the way home. The thunderstorm that rolled in around midnight provided a fitting backdrop to Jake's restless thoughts. As lightning illuminated his Spartan bedroom in strobe minus like flashes, he found himself remembering Helmand Province 2010, the mission that had ended his career, the betrayal that had cost for good men their lives. Sleep, when it finally came, was thin and troubled, populated by ghosts who spoke in the voices of the dead. The stranger arrived in Northport on a Tuesday, the kind of day when nothing remarkable was supposed to happen. Jake first noticed her at Mabel's diner, sitting alone in a booth, nursing a cup of coffee and studying a map spread out on the table. Even from across the room, something about her posture triggered his instincts. She was attractive in a subtle way, mid-minus to minus late 30s, auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, lean build beneath simple clothing. But it was her appearance that caught Jake's attention. It was how she sat, back to the wall, clear view of both exits, eyes that scanned the room in a measured pattern that most people wouldn't notice, but Jake recognized immediately. Military or intelligence, possibly both. Over the next 3 days, Jake observed her from a distance. She'd rented the Miller cabin up near Sawyer's Creek, paid cash for a month in advance, according to Mabel's gossip network. She bought minimal groceries, hiked along the river each morning, and spent hours taking photographs of the landscape with a high-minus-end camera. A tourist story that was almost perfect. Almost. On the 4th day, Jake followed her. Not obviously. She'd been trained by the best in the world to track targets across hostile territory. He watched as she hiked to a ridge overlooking the south bend of the river, same area the developers were interested in. She spent hours there, but instead of taking scenic photos, she used a spotting scope to observe the activities below. Where Coleman's people had set up a temporary office in trailers. When she left, Jake moved to her observation post. The position was perfect. Clear view, multiple escape routes, natural concealment. Not the choice of a casual hiker, but of someone with training. The small pile of cigarette but shed buried suggested she'd used this spot multiple times. Jake carefully excavated one. Marlboro Reds, a filter crushed in a distinctive way, a nervous habit, or something else. That evening, Jake drove into Albany and used the internet cafe there. Never the local library, where questions might be asked. He searched for information on Richard Coleman and his development company, Pinnacle Resorts. The company appeared legitimate on the surface with projects in Colorado and Nevada, but it was only 3 years old. Too new, too perfect. The photos of Coleman nagged at Jake's memory, but he couldn't place the face. 2 days later, Jake was preparing to close the shop when the bell above the door jingled. The woman from the diner stood in the entrance, backlit by the afternoon sun. "I need fishing gear," she said, her voice confident but with a softness that suggested the southeastern United States. "Georgia, maybe. I'm told you're the expert." "Depends what you're fishing for," Jake replied, studying her. Up close, he could see the faint tan lines of someone who spent significant time outdoors, and the calluses on her hands weren't those of an office worker. "Just trout," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Kate Reynolds, renting a place up by the creek." "Jake Hunter." He didn't offer his hand. "Tourist? Something like that. Taking some time off. Heard this was a quiet place." "It is. Most folks come here because they're not looking for excitement." "And you, Mr. Hunter, what brought you to Northport?" The question was casual, but Jake felt the weight behind it. Same as most. Quiet living. As he helped her elect appropriate gear for river fishing, Jake noted how she examined each item with the eye of someone familiar with evaluating equipment. When he mentioned a particular spot known for good catches, she nodded slightly. She already knew the location. "Strange place for a resort," Jake commented as he rang up her purchases. "8 bars." Her expression neutral. "What resort?" "Down at the South Bend. Developers looking to build something big." "Huh. Wouldn't have thought there'd be much demand out here." "My thought exactly." Their eyes met briefly. A moment of mutual assessment. Jake had interrogated enough people to recognize when someone was deciding how much truth to tell. "Well," she said finally, gathering her purchases, "maybe I'll check it out before they bulldoze everything. Thanks for the gear. Watch yourself on the river." Jake called after her. Currents can be tricky if you don't know what you're looking for. After she left, Jake locked the shop and drove to the ridge where Kate had been observing. From his truck, he retrieved a set of military-grade binoculars and settled in to watch the development site. 3 trailers. 6 men visible. More inside, probably. Regular patrols around the perimeter. Unusual for a civilian construction site. One man in particular caught his attention. Tall. Military bearing. Moving with the hyper-aware precision of someone with a special operations background. As dusk fell, Jake made his decision. Whatever was happening at the South Bend wasn't legitimate development, and Kate Reynolds wasn't a tourist. Time to find out what game was being played on his turf. That night, Jake moved silently through the woods toward Kate's cabin. The security measures Shed implemented were good. Fishing lines strung between trees at ankle height, reflective text positioned to catch flashlight beams, but not good enough to stop someone of Jake's caliber. He reached the small structure without triggering any alarms and observed from the tree line. Through the window, he could see Kate working at a laptop, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. On the table beside her lay a handgun. Not the typical choice for self-defense, but a Glock 19 with what looked like a suppressor attachment. Definitely not a tourist. Jake was about to withdraw when Kate suddenly looked up, straight toward his position. Impossible. He was fully concealed, motionless. But she moved with practiced efficiency, dousing the lights and disappearing from view. Jake immediately shifted position, moving deeper into the trees. But HED underestimated her. The whisper of movement behind him came just seconds before he felt the cold press of a gun barrel against his neck. "Hands where I can see them." Kate's voice was steady, professional. "Then we're going to walk very slowly back to my cabin and have a conversation, Mr. Hunter." "Or should I call you Lieutenant?" "You've got me confused with someone else," Jake said evenly, raising his hand slowly. "No confusion. Lieutenant Jake Hunter, SEIL Team 6 Dev Group, retired 2011 after the Helmand incident." Kate's voice remained calm, the pressure of the gun barrel unwavering. "Let's skip the denials. They're boring. And we have more important things to discuss." Inside the cabin, with the blinds drawn and a single lamp casting long shadows, Kate kept the Glock trained on Jake as he sat in the wooden chair Shed indicated. His own 6R now lay on the table between them, removed from his waistband with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly where to look. Who are you? Why me? Jake asked, though HED already begun piecing it together. As far as Northport is concerned, I'm Catherine Reynolds, wildlife photographer. She remains standing, maintaining the tactical advantage. But since we're being honest, I'm Rachel Harper, Office of Naval Intelligence. Oh, and an official. This operation isn't officially sanctioned. I'm on leave. Jake studied her face, looking for tells. Personal, then? Something flickered in her eyes. Pain quickly suppressed. Very. And what does ONI unofficial ONI want with a washed minus up old SEL? Rachel set her gun down but remained out of Jake's reach. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a small tattoo on her inner wrist. Dots and dashes. D. H. U. N. K. Jake read aloud. Then understanding dawned. David Harper. Your brother. My brother, she confirmed, who died in Helmand in 2010, along with 3 other SEALs on a mission that went catastrophically wrong because someone sold them out. The memory slammed into Jake like a physical blow. The ambush in the mountain pass, the overwhelming firepower they'd faced, the impossible precision with which the enemy had targeted them. They'd walked into a trap, a perfectly laid trap that could only have been set by someone with intimate knowledge of their mission parameters. David was my younger brother. Followed me into the Navy. I was so proud when he made it through BUDS. Rachel's composure cracked slightly. He wrote to me about his team leader, the legendary Jake Hunter. Said you were the best HED ever served with. Jake looked away, the weight of command and failure heavy on his shoulders. I got him killed. No, Rachel said sharply. Marcus Blackwood got him killed. The CIA liaison who sold your team's position to an Afghan warlord in exchange for $15 million and a memory stick containing classified NOC lists. Jake's head snapped up at the name. Blackwood. Disappeared. Thought he never found. That he was dead. HES very much alive. And HES here in Northport under the name Richard Coleman. The pieces clicked into place. The vague familiarity of Coleman's face in the photographs. Aged and altered. But the same man who had briefed Jake's team before that fatal mission. HES after something here, Rachel continued. Something valuable enough to create an entire fake development company as cover. What? Rachel hesitated, then made a decision. In 1968, during Operation Broken Arrow, a tactical nuclear device went missing during transport. A W-50 for SADM, Special Atomic Demolition Munition, backpack nuke, designed for special forces to use behind enemy lines if the Cold War ever went hot. Jake stared at her. That's a fairy tale. Something they tell the new guys. It's not. The device was being transported along the Hudson River when the team carrying it was ambushed. Official records say it was recovered, but that was a cover minus up. The SADM remained lost, intentionally hidden by the survivors who didn't trust their superiors with that kind of power. And you think it's here, under my river? Jake's disbelief was evident. I know it is, and so does Blackwood. Rachel pulled out a file folder and spread photographs across the table. Satellite imagery, topographical maps, and what appeared to be pages from a decades-minus-old mission report, heavily redacted. The last surviving member of that transport team died 3 months ago. Before he passed, he contacted O&I with coordinates. Jake examined the materials, his tactical mind already processing implications. If Blackwood has these coordinates, he doesn't have the exact location, but he knows it's somewhere along the South Bend. That's why the sudden interest in development. It gives him cover to search extensively. And what's your plan? One former intelligence officer against Blackwood and however many mercenaries HES hired. Rachel's eyes met his, determination evident. Originally, get confirmation on Blackwood's identity. Locate the device. Call in a proper recovery team. But HES moving faster than expected, and his security is substantial. You need help, Jake stated flatly. I need someone who knows the river. Someone with tactical experience who can't be connected to official channels. Someone Blackwood won't recognize because he thinks they're dead. Jake raised an eyebrow. Blackwood thinks I died in Helmand? Official records show you were critically wounded and later died of complications. Your request. You wanted to disappear. Jake stood and moved to the window, carefully peering through the blinds at the night beyond. The weight of the past pressed down on him. The faces of the men HED lost. The years of isolation. The carefully constructed anonymity of his existence in Northport. If this device is real, and if Blackwood gets his hands on it, he began, it would be catastrophic. Rachel finished. The W-50 for was small but powerful, equivalent to around 10 tons of TNT. In today's market, to the right buyer, it would be worth billions. Jake turned back to her, his decision already made. I have conditions. Name them. We do this my way. My terrain. My rules. And when it's done, I go back to being a ghost. Rachel nodded. Agreed. They'll need to bring in people I trust. How many? Maybe 3. Former teammates. Men Blackwood won't know. Jake picked up his Sig Sauer from the table, checked it automatically, then returned it to his waistband. We start tomorrow. I need to see everything you have on Blackwood's operation. Personnel. Equipment. Patterns. As he moved toward the door, Rachel called after him. Jake, there's something else you should know. He paused, looking back at her. The device. According to the dying man's testimony, it's still viable, still active. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. Not just a relic of the Cold War, but a functional nuclear weapon hidden beneath the peaceful surface of the Hudson River for over 50 years. Jake nodded once, his expression grim. Get some sleep, Rachel. Tomorrow, we go to war. The gray light of pre-Midas dawn found Jake on his dock, phone in hand, staring at a contact he hadn't called in over a decade. Mike Daniels had been his explosives expert, the man who could make anything from a simple distraction to a building-minus-leveling charge with whatever materials were at hand. After Helmand, Mike had retreated to a cabin in Montana, as far from human contact as he could manage. Jake dialed. After 5 rings, a gruff voice answered. This better be good. It's 4:30. In the goddamn morning. Aratango 1-9 or -7, Jake said, using their old mission confirmation code. Silence. Ben Hunter. Jesus Christ. They told me you were dead. That was the idea. I need you, Mike. Another pause. Helmand thing? Connected. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't critical. Mike's I carried the weight of memories best left buried. Location? Northport, New York. Hudson River. How fast can you be here? 20 minus for hours. Less if I break some speed limits. Break them, Jake said. And Mike, bring your kit. His second call was to Carlos Doc Rodriguez. From Arras, IL medic who now ran a cash-minus-only clinic in Tucson, treating those who couldn't or wouldn't seek conventional medical care. Unlike Mike, Carlos didn't sound surprised to hear Jake's voice. Always figured you were too stubborn to die, he said when Jake identified himself. What kind of trouble you in, Eve? The national security kind. Need your skills. Medical. Or the other kind? Carlos had been more than a medic. He'd been their secondary sniper and close-quarters specialist. Both. And bring anything you've got for underwater operations. Underwater? Oh. Dab, you don't ask for easy, do you? He'll be there tomorrow night. Jake spent the morning in his shop, maintaining his cover while mentally cataloging the weapons and equipment he had hidden throughout his property. At noon, he closed early, hanging a gone fishing sign that would surprise no one in town. He drove to the ridge overlooking the development site, where he found Rachel already in position with her spotting scope. Without a word, he settled beside her and raised his own binoculars. 6 new arrivals this morning, Rachel reported. Eastern European by their builds and movements. Probably X-military. Jake observed the men unloading equipment from unmarked trucks. Spetsnaz, he commented. The way they move. The discipline. Russian special forces are former. Anyway, you fought alongside them and joined tops, fought against them other times. I know how they operate. Through his binoculars, Jake focused on one man giving directions. Tall, silver-haired, with the confident bearing of command despite the designer clothes and carefully groomed appearance. Jake recognized him immediately. Blackwood, he murmured. Older, but it's him. Rachel tensed beside him. The man who betrayed your team. The man who killed your brother. Jake corrected softly. We'll get him. They spent 3 hours observing, noting shift changes, security patterns, and equipment. Blackwood's operation was professional and well-funded. Besides the original trailers, they de-established a perimeter of motion sensors and had begun assembling what appeared to be diving equipment. They're planning to search the riverbed, Rachel noted. We don't have much time. We move tonight, Jake decided. I need to see inside those trailers, get a better count of personnel and weaponry. As they prepared to leave, the sound of an approaching vehicle made them both freeze. A moment later, Police Chief Freeman appeared on the trail, alone and unarmed. Figured I'd find you up here, Jake. He called, seemingly unsurprised to find Rachel there as well. Then watching our new neighbors, too. Jake tensed, hand moving subtly toward his concealed weapon. Just checking fishing spots, Bill. Freeman snorted. Cut the crap, Lieutenant. Yeah, I know who you are. Known since you moved here. How? Jake demanded. I was Army Ranger 75-296. Last posting was liaison to JICCOG. Recognized your name. Confirmed with a few old contacts. Don't worry. Kept it to myself. Jake and Rachel exchanged glances. Freeman continued. Those aren't developers down there with too much security. Too many men with military bearing. Something stinks. After a moment's deliberation, Jake made a decision. Bill, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Freeman listened without interruption as Jake explained the situation. Blackwood's betrayal, the hidden nuclear device, the unsanctioned operation to recover it. When Jake finished, the police chief nodded slowly. Town of 200 people sitting on a nuclear weapon. Goddamn. He removed his hat, ran a hand through thinning gray hair. What do you need from me? Keep your department away from the South Bend. If anyone asks, say it's restricted due to unstable ground from recent rains. Then I may need access to your department's armory. Freeman nodded. Gun? But I want in. This is my town too. Jake studied the older man, evaluating. Despite his age, Freeman was fit. With the alert eyes of someone who hadn't forgotten his training, you still qualify with a rifle. A slow smile spread across Freeman's withered face. Expert marksman. 20 years running. Annual competition winner at the county level. Welcome aboard, Chief. That evening, Jake met Rachel at his cabin to finalize their reconnaissance plan. As he laid out topographical maps of the river and surrounding terrain, he noticed her studying the photographs on his sparse shelving. Pictures of his IL team from earlier, happier days. Is that him? She asked quietly, pointing to a young operator with a wide grin, an arm thrown around the shoulders of a man Jake recognized as himself, 15 years younger. David. Yeah, Jake looked at the photo with a pang of regret. Hell of a swimmer, could stay underwater longer than anyone had ever seen. Rachel touched the frame gently. He wrote about that in his letters. Said you called him Fish. We all had called signs. Pine was Ghost. Because you could disappear in any environment. Jake nodded, memories flooding back. Your brother saved my life in Kandahar 2009, Taliban ambush. I never got to repay that debt. Baby, this is how, Rachel said softly. Their planning session lasted until midnight. The operation would be simple but dangerous. Jake would infiltrate the development site, while Rachel provided overwatch from the ridge. Primary objective: intelligence gathering. Secondary objective: plant tracking devices on their vehicles to monitor movements. As they prepared to move out, Jake opened a hidden compartment in his floor and removed a black case. Inside lay specialized equipment HED hoped never to use again. A tactical infiltration suit, night vision goggles, communications gear, and a suppressed MK-23 pistol. Rachel raised an eyebrow. That's not standard retirement gear. The Navy let me keep a few souvenirs, Jake replied dryly. Call it payment for services rendered. They moved through the forest like shadows, using the river sounds to mask their approach. At the perimeter, Jake spotted the first sensor, a modern motion detector disguised as a rock. He carefully skirted it, identifying the blind spots in the security system. Count 8 guards, Rachel whispered through their comms. To buy the main trailer to patrolling. For at rest positions. Copy that, Jake murmured. Moving in, he advanced methodically, using natural cover and the techniques that had made him a legend among special operators. Freezing when the guards looked his way, moving only when their attention was elsewhere. He made his way to the cluster of trailers. The main trailer was clearly Blackwood's command center. Through a partially open window, Jake could hear voices. Blackwood and another man speaking in low tones. He positioned himself beneath the window, straining to hear. Sonar shows anomalies in the riverbed at these 3 points. An accented voice was saying, could be natural formations, could be what we're looking for. Begin diving operations tomorrow, Blackwood ordered. I want teams in the water at first light. The locals, not a concern. They're simple people. The police chief has been paid to look the other way. Jake's jaw tightened. Freeman was many things. Corrupt wasn't one of them. Blackwood had made a critical error in judgment, and if we encounter resistance, the accented voice asked, eliminate it quietly. Once we have the device, it won't matter. Well, be ghosts. Jake took a calculated risk and raised his head slightly to peer through the window. Inside, Blackwood stood over a table covered with maps and equipment. Beside him was a tall, lean man with the cold eyes of a professional killer. On the wall behind them hung a detailed topographical map of the river with 3 locations marked in red. Jake memorized the locations, then carefully withdrew. He'd seen enough. As he began his exfiltration, a guard rounded the corner of the trailer unexpectedly. Both men froze in momentary surprise. The guard recovered first, reaching for his weapon. Jake moved with the speed and precision of decades of training, closing the distance into steps. One hand clamped over the man's mouth. The other delivered a precise strike to the carotid artery. The guard collapsed without a sound. Jake dragged the unconscious man into the shadows and quickly tied his hands and feet. The HED be found eventually, but by then Jake would be long gone. Status? Rachel's tense voice came through the comms. Proceeding to exfil, Jake replied softly. Mission accomplished. They begin diving tomorrow. As he moved back through the perimeter, Jake felt a familiar sensation. The cold focus of combat. The heightened awareness of a mission in progress. For all his talk of retirement and quiet living, the calculated risk, the life minus death stakes, was what HED been trained for, what HED excelled at, what HED missed. Back at the ridge, Rachel awaited him, relief evident in her eyes. You made it. I told you I was good. Jake replied with the ghost of a smile. Got what we needed. They've narrowed the search area to 3 locations along the river. They hiked back toward Jake's cabin in silence, the weight of the coming conflict heavy between them. As they approached the clearing, Jake suddenly raised a hand, signaling Rachel to stop. Someone's inside, he whispered. Drawing his weapon, he approached cautiously, using the trees for cover. Through the window, a shadow moved across the interior. Jake circled to the rear entrance while Rachel covered the front. On his count, they burst through both doors simultaneously, weapons raised. The large figure, seated calmly at Jake's kitchen table, raised his hands lazily. Took you long enough. Coffee is getting cold. Jake lowered his pistol, a slow grin spreading across his face. Mike, you're early. Mike Daniels, 50 minus 8 years old, with a build like a bull and hands that could crush walnuts, shrugged massive shoulders, had a tailwind. His eyes shifted to Rachel, assessing. Is the Owen agent? Rachel Harper, she introduced herself, holstering her weapon. David's sister. Mike's expression softened slightly. Fish was a good kid, one of our best. He turned back to Jake. So, you going to tell me why we're hunting a traitor after all these years? And what's this about a nuke in the river? Jake looked at his old friend, the man who pulled him from burning vehicles, who stood back minus to minus back with him in firefights across 3 continents, who carried the bodies of their fallen brothers in Helmand. It's a long story, Jake said, settling into a chair, and you're not going to believe half of it. Mike poured himself another cup of coffee from Jake's spot. Try me. I drove 12 hours straight to get here. Least you can do is tell me what kind of suicide mission I signed up for. As the night deepened around the isolated cabin, Jake laid out everything they knew. The W-50 for SADN hidden somewhere in the riverbed. Blackwood's mercenary force searching for it. The imminent threat if they succeeded. When he finished, Mike was silent for a long moment, turning his coffee mug in scarred hands. Finally, he looked up, eyes hard with resolve. So, we're going up against a former CIA operator with a private army of X-Spetsnaz to find a 50-year-old nuclear weapon before they do. He snorted, and I thought retirement was getting boring. Carlos will be here tomorrow, Jake said. That gives us 3 SEIL operators, 1 ONI agent, and a ranger against what? 20 mercenaries? 20-2 at last count, Rachel corrected. All with special forces training. Mike grinned, the expression transforming his rugged face into something almost predatory. I like those odds. Almost fair. Jake spread the river maps across the table. They've identified 3 potential locations. We need to find the device before they do. And if we can't, Mike asked. Jake's sighs met Rachel's, then Mike's. Then we make sure they don't leave with it. Whatever it takes. The unspoken understanding passed between them. This was a mission with no extraction plan, no backup, no official support. If they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. If they succeeded, no one would ever know what they'd done, just like old times. As dawn approached, the 3 sat around Jake's table, weapons laid out for cleaning, plans drawn and redrawn. The years seemed to fall away as they worked. Muscle memory and shared experiences creating a seamless team once more. Jake Hunter, a ghost who had disappeared into the quiet backdrop of Northport, was gone. In his place at the SCIL commander. Focused, lethal, alive in a way he hadn't been for years. The hunt had begun. The morning light filtered through the pines as Carlos Rodriguez's weathered Jeep rumbled up the dirt road to Jake's cabin. At 60 years old, the former SEIL medic moved with the careful precision of a man intimately familiar with how bodies break and how they heal. His salt and pepper hair was cropped short, his face deeply tanned from the Arizona sun, eyes hidden behind polarized sunglasses. Jake met him on the porch, the 2 men exchanging a silent handshake that said more than words ever could. Behind them, Mike emerged from the cabin, carrying a mug of coffee. Doc, Mike acknowledged with a nod. Demolitions, Carlos replied with the ghost of a smile. Still blowing stuff up, only when necessary. The 3 men stood for a moment, the weight of their shared history settling around them. They had buried teammates together, bled together, survived impossible odds together. Now, years later, fate had drawn them back into the shadow world they once inhabited. Inside, Rachel had transformed Jake's living room into an operations center. Mats covered the wall. Surveillance photos were arranged chronologically. A secure laptop displayed satellite imagery of the river. She looked up as the men entered, immediately assessing Carlos with the practiced eye of an intelligence officer. Welcome to the war room, Doc, Jake said. Rachel Harper, Office of Naval Intelligence. Rachel, this is Carlos Rodriguez, best combat medic in the teams, and a decent shot when he needs to be. Decent? Carlos raised an eyebrow. I outscored you in the last 3 qualifications. You had a better scope. Familiar banter eased the tension as Carlos set down his bags. He opened one to reveal an impressive array of medical supplies, far beyond standard first aid. The second bag contained something more lethal, a disassembled sniper rifle with a specialized barrel. SR-25, Carlos explained, noticing Rachel's interest. Modified for subsonic rounds, quieter than a whisper when suppressed. You came prepared, she commented. Jake said it was important. Carlos looked around at the assembled intelligence. So, we're hunting nukes and traitors, just like the good old days. For the next hour, the team briefed Carlos on the situation while he methodically cleaned and assembled his rifle. When they finished, he was silent for a long moment, absorbing the information. Blackwood, he finally said. The name like acid on his tongue. I always wondered what happened to that snake. He looked at Jake. You know, he'll kill us all if he gets the chance. Not if we get him first, Mike growled. Jake unrolled a detailed topographic map of the river. Blackwood has identified 3 potential locations where the SADM might be hidden, all within this 5-mile stretch. His team begins diving operations today. Carlos studied the map. What's the water like? Depth? Current? Visibility? Variable, Rachel answered. 15 to 30 feet deep depending on the location. Current is moderate to strong in places. Visibility about 5 to 10 feet in the clearest areas. That's going to make their search difficult, Carlos noted. Even with modern equipment, finding a 50-year-old device in those conditions is challenging. Which gives us time, Jake said. Mike, what did you bring for underwater work? Mike grinned and hefted a heavy duffel bag onto the table. Special delivery. Shaped charges designed for underwater use. Remote detonators with encrypted signals. And these beauties. He removed what looked like ordinary rocks. Motion sensors disguised as river stones. Navy's latest. Not even available to most active -duty teams yet.